In the real world, students of the 21st century are expected to come with a set of skills unparalleled in their parents' era. We want their brains to be filled with concepts and process skills that we as teachers endeavor to relay to them each day. Unfortunately, our students' brains sometimes more closely resemble this. So what can we do? How can we appeal to a child's natural sense of wonder about the world? How do we make the neural connections within their minds that will allow them to see and understand that they have the whole world in their hands and that the future of the world is up to them? How do we ignite a passion for learning, an innate need to want to know the answers to the questions that are more prolific than this? Albert Einstein has the right idea. Science classes that are dry and isolated do nothing to inspire creativity or curiosity. So, what do I propose? I'm so glad you asked. My capstone project will focus on connecting science literacy goals to English language arts goals. The main areas of concentration will be with second language acquisition in learners, and we'll create a Saturday tutoring program that addresses speaking, listening, reading, writing within the context of science. The goals of my project are to design a curriculum that will meet not only language arts but also the next generation science standards. I want to give children opportunity to learn outside of the regular school day, and I want all my curriculum materials and strategies to be research-based and include literature, scientific inquiry, student-teacher discourse and reflection, as well as written communication. And I want to integrate science and language arts as well as a little math, so students have activities to make connections between the disciplines, and they can use the literacy skills within the context of any type of academic setting. So, let's start with the nature of science. What is it? And what does it have to do with the concept of science literacy that is being encouraged in every school in America? Well, according to Norris and Phillips, science literacy embodies both a fundamental sense and also a derived sense. The first sense deals with the communication, and the second with the understanding and application of science. So basically we're talking about whether an educated person can speak, read, and write about science, and do they have a body of knowledge in science. The current level of scientific literacy in the United States is, in a word, pathetic. Study after study shows that overall, only about 5% of U.S. adults are considered scientifically literate. When compared with the rest of the world, the picture looks even dimmer. So, how do we change this trend? By focusing not just on the science content part of science literacy, but on the literacy part as well. Why literacy? Literacy skills enable scientists to communicate, inform, and persuade multiple types of audiences. Language is the main technology that they use. And because science uses empirical standards, logical arguments, and sound reasonings, scientists have to develop explanations that are consistent with observable evidence, and they must be able to define and defend their findings and their work. The only way that the average Joe knows anything about science is through communication. Let's face it, not everyone can be an Einstein. We can, however, train ourselves to think in more creative ways and to become critical reasoners who ask questions and evaluate the answers for ourselves. We may never be able to research the microscopic or travel into space to study the cosmos, but we would much rather have our students dream about that and learn to analyze cool topics like that, instead of always worrying and focusing on this. So, what's the best way to do science? How do we synthesize real-world literacy skills into the classroom? By using real-world materials such as informational text, literature, and writing and speaking skills. We need a balanced literacy model that takes into account all the facets of communication. Because even in kindergarten, our students are expected to become literate in non-fictional contexts. During my review of the literature for this project, I came upon a study who tried to find this balance. The Cervetti study tried to ask one important question. The goal is to literacy for all children. But what if there are obstacles to building this foundation? Enter the second language learner. The number of non-English speaking students has risen 76% from 1993 to 2000. The research-based recommendations for quality literacy instructions when you're talking about English language learners is to have effective instructional input that's comprehensible, in context, and for a real-life purpose. We need to work on higher order thinking skills that should be integrated within the content being taught. ELL students also learn academic English as well as conversational English and understand both of the structures, and then they are more successful. And speaking and listening skills are more effectively supported through interactive methods such as student-teacher dialogue and student-to-student dialogue. Learning a new language can be a challenging task, even more challenging than learning to read and write in your home language. Coming to a brand new country can be downright intimidating, especially in the science classroom. So, what do the experts recommend? They recommend using concrete and visual clues, as well as building on the student's existing concrete understandings can help ease the transition from their native language to English. Also, having a supportive and effective classroom environment and giving teachers the proper training can help them in making specific instructional strategies that will work well with the second language learner. Understanding communication is key. What kind of challenges might our students face? They may have specific linguistic difficulties that are associated with science instruction and comprehension. These problems might be semantic, syntactic, or even pragmatic when it comes to textual understanding. So, where do we start? I'd like to say that it isn't rocket science, but sometimes it really is. Let's start with understanding student learning. The National Research Council identifies 3 learning principles for all students. First, all students attend school with their own personal understanding of how the world works, and these can either be stepping stones or impediments for school learning. Students must also gain a strong base of foundational knowledge before they can begin to process information using higher order or critical thinking skills. And finally, students need to become metacognitive about their learning and be provided lots of opportunities to apply and practice those skills. But students need even more. They need time and encouragement to reflect on their learning. And they need to be instructed in how to do their own critical thinking. Giving up our traditional ways of teaching can be difficult, but behaviorist approaches just have not achieved the desired results. Just as all the sciences are connected, integration of language skills are just as important in achieving scientific literacy. The second part of my literature review focused on the role of listening, speaking, reading, and writing in the science classroom. Finding the right text for integration and synthesis is time-consuming, but the reward is worth the effort. Discourse, or speaking, is important for sharing knowledge, clarifying, asking questions, hypothesizing, explaining, and formulating ideas among peers. Analytical writing is a valuable tool for transforming simple ideas into more coherent and structured knowledge. And talking is really the precursor to writing, as it takes the student's basic knowledge and allows them to add to their base and comprehend when they interact with their peers. Science literacy involves knowledge, a reading ability to evaluate print-based information, and the writing ability to communicate thoughts to others and have an impact on their thinking. Reading and writing activities can become conceptual tools to help students analyze and interpret scientific ideas. And science cannot just be hands-on, but it must also be minds-on. Another cool thing about using literacy skills is reading and writing can help not just students, but teachers diagnose knowledge gaps and student misconceptions. You want to use both technical and creative writing, just as scientists do in the real world. but teachers need to take care to model the writing process and provide examples, guiding questions, and show students how to write conclusions. So, how do we take all the information we want our students to know and empower them to own it? By teaching them this: how to think creatively and critically. A big part of this is using collaborative and cooperative groups. Having multiple perspectives on a topic naturally leads to deeper thinking as students compare what others share to their own understanding. In this example, students are sharing ideas, and together they must evaluate and choose the one that they will own. These are life goals, not just science or school goals. Working together adds a level of comfort and risk that cannot be replicated in a whole classroom setting. Let's start with reading. Reading can be done in a small group setting with students of different reading levels that can promote group comprehension of text. Giving students goals for their reading strengthens those skills and gives them a purpose for their reading. Reading responses like this one can help a child organize his thoughts on the reading he has just done. Other graphic organizers can help children figure out the main idea of a text. Responding in writing is another great way teachers can see if true comprehension has taken place. This kind of critical thinking will open up doors for our students. Working together towards a common goal more closely resembles the real world of enterprise. Each child brings their own strengths and weaknesses to the table, but they come away with a more complete picture than when they arrived. This kind of model can especially be effective in a science inquiry setting. Inquiry-based learning lets children ask, investigate, create, discuss, and reflect on their work. Different levels of inquiry can be modified for different projects or achievement levels. If students can answer these questions, they are well on their way to becoming a more critical thinker.
So what is the teacher's role in all this? The last part of my literature review covers teacher knowledge and cognition considerations. For example, many teachers have science anxiety due to their perceived lack of science knowledge, which affects their confidence and enthusiasm. Some view science as not as important of a subject as math or language arts, and others still feel limited by the textbooks and the scope and sequence required by their school or their district. The research shows that a teacher's scholarly and pedagogical orientations, coupled with a teacher's personal experiences, all had a significant influence in convincing teachers that they should be making a science-language-arts connection in their classroom. In other words, we know that our role really should look like this. Sometimes it can seem like an uphill battle for both us and the kids. But if we want to be a 21st century teacher who does cool things like this, or this, then you know what it's going to take. Getting past the hands-on to the minds-on will definitely be a challenge. Showing students the collaboration model will encompass many trials to get it right. And encouraging students to really stop and think about the problems they are asked to solve might take an act of Congress. But let's review what we know so far. We know the traditional methods of teaching science have not translated into deep understanding or the ability to communicate that understanding to others. We know that for English language learners, it's especially important to focus as much on language development as the content of the subject area. And synthesizing language arts objectives like reading and writing strategies into the science classroom can create a contextualized environment that benefits both of those skill sets. In the classroom, teachers need to assure that communication skills more realistically reflect what real scientists do as they read, write, explain, defend, and analyze their text and their data. And hands-on activities done in the science lab should be expanded and enriched by classroom discourse, reading, and writing to ensure that minds-on metacognitive thinking and learning are always occurring. So, don't be an old, moldy teacher. Embrace the future. Get kids thinking and wondering about all the fascinating things that make science so much fun. Both you and your students will be better for it.